Sweet.
Yeah.
Woo.
And
So,
you were complaining about the printing, but the printing in mine looks great. It's
oh,
probably because
good.
yours was probably
So
printed
like,
in whatever strange place they
no,
print
they get
from.
printed in the same place and shipped out here. So on page 38 at the top on the right, does it just have a little circle by itself and then a little line under it?
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
that's the problem.
It
Yeah,
should
there's
have
supposed to be a
a.
vertical line
Well,
connecting the
that
circle.
sucks because
Otherwise,
that's got to make it
yeah, it's
hard.
like,
That's got to make it hard for accuracy.
yeah, exactly. So I have a new version. So anybody who bought it November 3rd or after, there should be all the vertical lines where they should be. So it's a
Yeah.
very minor issue, but it's an issue. And so yeah, that episode 124, I go through and say where all those vertical lines are. Nice.
So tell
And
us about what this is, how you came up with it, and all of that
yeah,
jazz in
sure.
the
So
sexiest
back in the
voice you
day,
can.
back in the day, I think in the book I said that I was a junior in high school, but when I thought about it, I think it was the beginning of my senior year in high school, and we were going over, basic introduction like you do in high school. They do introduction to this, introduction to that, so very basic molecular biology. And they were talking about the DNA, and I became fascinated partly because I was in practicus. And my mind had become accustomed to seeing patterns, finding patterns, even patterns where they aren't there. And so of course they're talking about 4 nucleic acids, but really there's 5, but the 5th one never leaves the nucleus. I'm like, that sounds an awful lot like 5 elements, but only 4 of them are present in the world of the senses, and one of them, is I'm like, okay, so I'm making notes. Okay, thymine is spirit, adenine is water, and it's like working out the elemental correspondence to the 5 nucleic acids, and so then the permutations of 3 and 4, of course, were making me think of the Yod He Vav He Yod He He Vav. That was an inaccurate note there at the second, but yeah, the permutations of Yod He Vav He for the tablet of shewbread, and because you have basically 4 nucleic acids, and then in combinations of 3. So like, let's say you have fire, 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 water. So of course we were getting into subtatwas in practicus. And so I'm thinking in terms of like fire of water of earth, earth of air of fire, water of fire, and then kind of putting it all together and so I made this sort of thing where, for whatever reason, just at that moment, I was literally sitting in class, and I made the 2 opposite pairs. Thymine, adenine was fire and water, and then guanine and cytosine I made, air and earth. And so I have air and earth left and right, and fire and water top and bottom, which years later, decades later, people are like, what is this based on anyway? Like, I'm like, I don't know. It's just how I did it. Like, this isn't the Rose-Cross Lawman, this isn't the LBRP, this isn't the BRH. And I'm like, no, it's the DNA. Fuck off, But one thing I discovered later is it's an awful lot like the positioning of the 4 worlds in Vajrayana Buddhism. So here you have fire at the top, water at the bottom, and then air on the left, and earth on the right. However, in the context of Vajrayana, the red is actually in the west. And so that's a whole other thing. And yellow is earth and green is air, which is kind of, what? So that's like a brain herdy thing. See, I painted this Ashok pillar in Tibetan style, so sort of appropriate for this DNA thing. So that was how it started, was just making these little symbols. And so since, for example, with like serine or valine, there's like sometimes 6 different permutations of these 4 nucleic acids, all of which will signal the ribosome to use serine. So it's sort of like, I would say, yeah, I would liken it, because I'm using this whole extended linguistic metaphor, and every time I think, well, the linguistic metaphor kind of runs out at this point. Like, it doesn't actually. Up until the point where you get into long proteins, where you and I have words that we use to communicate. The body has long proteins that are basically like small creatures. So it's when people imagine having magic words, that when you speak the word manifests in the form of a spirit that'll go do your bidding. That's actually DNA. That's what it literally does, is it speaks and then things happen that would normally take thousands of years on their own to happen, if they happened at all. The production of dimethyltryptamine, for instance, is two spoken words from the number 7 chromosome. Yeah. So so if I draw this symbol, if for the people on audio, I drew a capital A, then you know that's an A. If I do this, you know that's an A. So two different ways of saying the same letter. So in a similar way, serine, uracil, adenine, guanine, uracil, or adenine, guanine, cytosine, they're both serine, and so kind of it tends to work out that the more common letters, the more common amino acids in sequences, have more ways that these permutations of 4 nucleic acids, because if you do the math, there's 64, because it's 4 cubed. 4 times 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. So for example, if you were making sub-tatwas, you'd have to make 64. You'd have your Earth of your Prithivi of, of Apis of what have you, of Prithivi or whatever. I can only think of those two. Akasha of Apis. Yeah. So you'd end up with 64, but there's only basically 20 amino acids that are referred to in the DNA, with only one exception that's very rare. And then there's a stop command. So like the telegraph, they have a stop at the end of every sentence. There's a stop command here. So there's 3 permutations of the 4 that tell you, okay, stop copying the messenger RNA, go make that peptide or protein or whatever. And so I made these symbols to encapsulate all of the different. So here's just an example. It looks a little odd at first, but there is a method to the madness. The circles, for basically for people who are very new with sigil making, the small circle means begin, and then the perpendicular line at the end means end. It's like a phallus and a vulva, basically. And so you start with the vulva and end with the phallus. And so then there's the places that look like it's indicating an angle, but that's not indicating an angle. That's indicating that you double back. So down here, it's broken down. This by itself, for someone who doesn't know the codons, this won't tell you the codons, because there's more than one way to interpret the lines moving around. But learning the codons, then you understand why this is the symbol for that letter. Because, it goes this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this, and you put them all together, and you get a symbol that combines all 6 of those. And so the letter serine, since it can be written in 6 different ways, I combine all 6 of those ways and put it in one letter. And I thought it was, an R word that we're not supposed to use anymore, but this was the 90s. It was still around a little bit. I thought it was lame. Can you say lame? I thought it was mentally deficient that people would refer to there being 4 letters in the DNA when clearly there were 20.
Did you just call it mentally deficient?
I know, is that the
dude?
Because you're not supposed to say
that's fucking retarded.
So yeah, I thought it was one of those words that
I had to
that people would say that there were 4 letters in the DNA alphabet because there's clearly 20, and you just have to look at it. You have to realize that these little binary on-off switches aren't the letters. Those are like the strokes in the writing of the letters. that you have a clear language, you have clearly what are letters, because if those are letters, then amino acids are the words, then a peptide is a sentence, and then, okay, yeah,
So
you could put it that way, but let's not. That's really
if
dumb.
I was going to use those on a talisman or something, how would I do it?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, that's where I'm directing it is toward occultists and stuff.
So what do
But
I
I'm
do?
actually hoping this will replace the present day linguistic metaphor within actual molecular biology. So, okay, let's say, for example, sorry for all the throat clearing. Let's say, for example, I mean, just to keep it simple, if there was a particular amino acid that you liked the properties of, just again to keep it simple. Yes, so for example, glutamic acid to keep the brain functioning properly. Like, okay, I want more brain power, so as I'm adding things, I'm adding geomancy and stuff and Taft Arthrath to this talisman. Maybe you'll use the glutamic acid, talisman. And then when you're drawing it, you could draw it in a particular way by starting, with this one, and then on top of it, drawing this one, and, saying, guanine, adenine, guanine, adenine, guanine, while you're drawing it. That'd be one simple way. But I think what might be more interesting for people is the words. So, yeah, so for this, you have to kind of like be familiar already with the words. And so on the last chapter, I gave the recommendation to start to memorize adenine, uracil, guanine, cytosine, adenine, uracil, guanine, cytosine. So then, okay, from there, then you can say, okay, oxytocin, that's the first letter. The second letter is this or this. So yeah, you can basically do a sigil in the air or on a talisman, combining all of these, the letters in oxytocin, for instance. And then while you're doing it, you can kind of think of, hugging somebody that you like or what have you. There's also, in the example words, there's bradykinin and angiotensin 2, which are like for lowering blood pressure and raising blood pressure. So those, depending on what issue someone's having, those are two that you could work with. There's mood stabilizer. There's substance P, which is a mood stabilizer, helps to process emotions. So yeah, it's just basically like a new language rather than having to kind of decipher the Enochian and figure out what this angel does. Well, this is the sub-angel of this element, of that element, and this kind of thing. So abstractly, that would govern this part of Italy. And it's like, okay, that's good for what it is, but this is also, this is working with different things. So rather than figuring out which Enochian cacodemon to invoke for your blood pressure, then maybe you can turn to the DNA alphabet, for instance. It has different rulership, different what's the word? Jurisdiction. This would be operating within. So yeah, that's the idea. I leave it, it's not a complete system, it's the beginning of a system. So this is just like introducing these concepts, and then if somebody wants to take it and run with it, I gave like 8 or 7 example words, example peptides, and just kind of the background and concept behind why I did it the way I did it, why I chose top, bottom, left, and right for these particular nucleic acids, and then, of course, the longer enzymes, the one that's on the back, for instance, which are responsible for the production of dimethyltryptamine, kind of to allow a person to back up into a space of contemplation of the organic orchestra of themselves, the organic orchestra of, or at least of everything below a certain point on the tree of life. I think a lot of the ruach is informed by a lot of the biological functions while we're alive anyway. There's a backflow where I think, you know, when a person's done with their life and they go forth as the image of a soul, the personality of that soul was at least partially influenced by the genetics and the environment and the heredity of the body that they were in. So however you want to look at it, if somebody is coming from a space of there is nothing but the body, the consciousness is a byproduct of neurotransmitters firing in an orchestral fashion, then sure, you can approach it from that standpoint too. Or you can approach it from a, you know, this is an this is a owner's manual for a kind of owner's manual for my car that I'm driving while I'm incarnate in this world. Either way, it works either way, however you want to approach it. But yeah, so that's it. Like I said, it's not a complete system. It's sort of an introduction to a system that doesn't exist. But you know,
it's pretty. It's would you say, is it so far your best selling book that you've put out?
I mean, it was the one that a lot of people bought all at once when I first introduced it. I think generally speaking, and this does quite a number on my sense of identity, and you know, all this is VH Frater BT, who wears the robe and does the magic, is much more popular than Edward Reeb. So that's kind of like, huh. Like, you know, I mean, I think I relate a little too much when Batman gets jealous of Bruce Wayne because Catwoman is in love with one and not the other, or, you know, this kind of thing. It's like,
that's hilarious.
You know, if I'm craving attention, if I want people to like look at what I'm doing, then I have to put on the robe and say, this is Frater BT, and everybody will be like, oh, hey, it's Frater BT. But it's like, but you saw me before. That was me too. You know, when I take off the robe and I'm just wearing my regular clothes and saying, hey guys, I wrote a bunch of poetry. It's crickets, you know, like these are all my short stories. A lot of them are influenced from my life as Frater BT. And people go,
I remember the first time I tried to do your podcast.